Hello, my name is Barylski, and I'll be giving a presentation on George Metesky. He was also known as the Mad New York Bomber, and he terrorized New York for 16 years throughout the 40s and 50s. He planted 33 bombs, but only 22 of them exploded. They were pipe bombs with simple timers for explosions, and he would attach notes to the bombs, and they would always read very threatening things. 15 people were hurt, and he was angry at Constellation Edison, who was a utility company. And the reason he was angry was because after World War I, he went to work for them. And when he went to work for them, he was working on a boiler, and one of the boiler pipes exploded, and he inhaled all this noxious gas, and it really singed his lungs, and he ended up ending with tuberculosis. And he tried to file for complaints and for compensation to pay, and it never happened, so he ended up being fired, and he never got any money for his injuries, and it left him very crippled. So then, of course, he goes on this bombing spree. And he leaves these bombs all over New York, and he puts these nasty cut out writings on them, and he talks about like they're going to get what they deserve, and the police are kind of freaked out and they don't know what to do. But a lot of them, like I said, a lot of them didn't explode. So, and they didn't really hurt that many people, so they just kept it very hush. And we're going to talk about that later. So eventually, he goes on, put these bombs. He takes breaks periodically. He took a break for World War II. He wrote a letter saying that I'm very patriotic, so I'm not going to put any bombs while the war is going on. And then he would just take breaks off, so that's why it lasted for 16 years. He wasn't continuously doing this for 16 years. He would take a few years off. So he started putting the notes again. He put bombs and notes again around 1956, and the police finally contacted a man named Dr. James Brussels. He was actually the head psychiatrist for World War II and the Korean War, and he came up with a profiling of what this man, or who this man might be or be like. And he said the bomber will most likely be between his 40s and 50s and male and paranoid. And the reason it's between the 40s and his 50s was because you often, your paranoia peaks in your 30s, and the case has been going on for 16 years, so that's why he said that. Unmarried, Eastern European, living in Connecticut, possibly living with older female relative, and stocky. Now the evidence for this was because historically, bombers are male. Paranoia peaks in your 30s, and the case has been going on, so I already mentioned that. 85% of mental illness people are a little more heavy set. The way this guy wrote in letters, the speech patterns kind of pointed to Slavic origins because he was very pretentious and stiff. So it just didn't read right. So it kind of read like if you were translating, if you were like once learned a language in a different country. And that bombs are actually a really common tool for terrorizing people in those countries. So then eventually he publicized this in the paper, and George got really mad and he wrote a letter back, and he writes this big letter, and the letter actually reveals the date at which he was injured. And that's gonna be important because eventually the police were able to pick that up, and within like a couple of days they were able to track him down to his house. And what they found was that they found George in Waterbury, Connecticut. He was stocky, unmarried, 54 years old, Lithuanian, and he lived in a house with older sisters, so creepily close to what he predicted in his profiling. He was eventually charged with 47 separate crimes, and psychologists actually diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, and he wasn't able to competently stand trial, so he was confined to the Manhattan State Hospital. And he stayed there for his full term of 25 years, and he actually was released in 1973. And he was actually able to live to the age of 90, so this guy had a pretty big life. But back to this. So the police work is what actually was really important in terms of deciding how the police were working. The pros were they kept it secret during all the letters that were out. They didn't really let the public know, so there was really no mass hysteria. That's definitely a pro. And the TD investigation, which I'm going to get to again. And the cons is they could have contacted Dr. Brussels a little sooner. Could have happened. Maybe they could have waited 16 years. And so now applications to criminal profiling is that now James Brussels himself said that criminal profiling is not a science. He was saying that it's really gathering information and making predictions, which is not science. Predictions is not science. And it can create tunnel vision because you create this person that the police want to look for now. And he may not really exist because they could be wrong. So you're really putting blinders like on a horse, which is not necessarily good for police work where you really need to open your gaze. And they didn't talk about this. The police didn't really contribute it, but Brussels actually mentions it in his book later when he talks about the case, is that it actually led the cops down a couple rabbit trails for a while. And now back to the conclusion was that George responded to a publication in the newspaper of this profile, and he wrote a letter back detailing the dates of his case. And then because of that, that was picked up by one of the secretaries who works at Consulate in Edison, who notified police, and it was through their tedious investigation work that they were able to really find this guy. So it wasn't really the profiling that found him, it was that he responded to the profiling publication and then revealed some details about it, and then through the details that George revealed, the police were able to work backwards from that and figure out who this guy was. All right, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.